Welcome to Sovereign Souls, a special podcast sponsored by the Spirit Release Academy with your hosts, Jonno and Andy Porter.
In this episode, we discuss client journeys, stories of healing, and the changes after a clearing.
So welcome to this episode. So we're going to go over the whole journey, I guess, from a client perspective. So again, we work with clients from all over the world. We've established that those clients really present with a whole kind of range of different problems, different issues, different symptoms, and everyone has a different kind of perspective as to how they feel and why they feel the way they do. Quite often with SRA, we're talking about the kind of very fringe clients, those people that are kind of suicidal, self-harming. They're at the kind of worst end of the spectrum. And of course, they are generally difficult people to try and deal with. Lots of them have had different traumas in their life, different abuse, and they tend to move to drugs and substance and things as a method of kind of trying to block
Kind of
that
self-medication stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, self-medicating to a certain degree, really. And of course, self-medication makes things worse because, as we know, I think Jonno talked about in a previous podcast, but we're talking about the etheric field and how that field breaks down. And when it breaks down, obviously you get to a point that it perforates, things can connect. And of course, drugs make that worse. So from that perspective, people that are self-medicating, taking drugs, are going to end up with more negative things connected from a spiritual perspective. And of course, they then present with more difficult symptoms and issues.
And I think that's the thing. It's kind of giving an opportunity for somebody to have quick relief that is sort of cheap and affordable. And this is where it needs to go in there before someone starts getting into the addictive patterns and the addictive behaviours, because very often it is self-medicating. They don't know where to turn. A lot of people feel let down by the system. There's not enough help for people with mental health at the moment, and trying to get anybody to help you is quite a task at the moment. So instead of someone trying to help you, if someone can just help cure you, that's a huge difference. That's a monumental difference. And it's a difference that can be made literally within an hour, possibly a few days. And as we mentioned before in previous podcasts, we have an 80% success rate. So 80% of the people that we do work have a very positive experience. We will go into that in more detail in a minute. But also we are looking to narrow that gap between 80% to 100%. However we do that, we've got some fantastic practitioners coming through now with many, many different skills. And this is where we're working towards just narrowing that gap, pushing it from 80% to 85, 85 to 90, and 90 upwards. And I think really probably the best way to describe this, Andy, is to just have a chat about some of the effects that people have had for the reason to have a clearing, the reason why they wanted this work or had this work, and then the effects afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to cover that whole ground, really. I guess for some clients just feel off. They feel off quite often. Again, from a kind of weekly perspective, we read the client summaries when they're booking appointments, and there's always a large number that say things like, "I feel okay, but I feel like I'm being watched." Generally, I'm being watched in the shower and other personal places, which tends to always raise a little bit of a smile, really, from my perspective, because we know that, okay, so they're being watched, so there's probably some type of energy, whether it be an entity or a discarnate spirit that's in the space. And of course, they're picking up from an etheric perspective the fact they know they're being watched. So when we work through a clearing, obviously we connect with those energies, the spirit guides connect with them and clear them. And then, of course, that person observes the fact they're not being watched anymore. So it's kind of a very quick way to actually provide that level of satisfaction, really, for clients that are just don't really have anything wrong with them particularly, but they're just spiritually sensitive to notice there's something not right, and they're observing there's something not right in their home.
That's right. And it's I think, when we talk about the range of people that come through, the recipients of the work, it can be, as Andy said, they just don't feel themselves. We've all experienced that. We've all been out somewhere and you come back and you don't feel energetically pure. And if you're not energetically pure, then that would mean to us that you're not sovereign. Sovereign is the word and the phrase that we use, which means that your soul is solely yours. There's no interference. There's no disruption. and you take ownership of your own energy. But different energies can be picked up in different times. Everybody, I believe, is psychic. We all understand that we have feelings. When we meet someone, we can think, I know that person. I know that I'm going to like that person. I already get on with that person. I don't know why. But that feeling is already there. Likewise, you can meet somebody and have an instant dislike. This is your psychic energy. This is your intuition picking up on different energy waves, and you're either blending with their frequency or you're not, one or the other. Likewise, you can walk into a room and you can instantly feel uncomfortable, or indeed you can feel comfortable. This is all your psychic, your intuition, the way that you work in picking up different energy fields. So, for example, if you're walking around somewhere like Walmart, somewhere like a superstore, somewhere like a supermarket, for example, how many different people walk through the entrance to that door every single day? Hundreds, thousands. Everybody will have an energy field. Everybody will be carrying their own trauma, their own experiences. So when you're walking through as a sensitive, somebody walking through as an energy, as a light worker, particularly people that work in holistic therapy or people that work in mediumship, they're going to go around picking up all different energies. And this is sometimes why when you come back, you don't quite feel yourself. It could just be that you feel drained. It could be that you haven't got the energy anymore. It could just be that you feel a little bit off. The other scenario is, of course, that you begin to start hearing voices. You begin to hear instruction. And this is really where the work for us becomes interesting. So through the Academy with practitioners, we always use the phrase, find your fit. And that's for people that want to do either the work for people that do just feel a little bit off, they don't necessarily know why, or we have the more extreme work, which is certainly where myself and Andy are very comfortable working, which is where there is auditory hallucination, auditory interference, voices coming in. Sometimes when you're watching the news, I'm sure we've all seen it, we're watching the news and somebody's gone out and harmed others. And then during their court case, it was reported that they were hearing voices. It was reported that they were instructed to either harm themselves that day or harm others. And we believe that on the majority of cases, that is a voice that we could release. That is a voice that we could disconnect from that person, from the recipient, and probably the effects will be felt within an hour or sometimes a few days. But an example of which is I was called one day on a Sunday morning about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was telephoned, and I had a mother who was clearly very upset calling me. Jonno, I think you can help. You're the only person we can go to. My daughter has been up all night, rocking on a chair, shouting, swearing, and speaking a different language. So I was like, right, okay, let's see what we can do. The cause of this apparently was a Ouija board. Ouija boards, in my opinion, are perfectly safe if you know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, then don't go near them, because they're opening a portal to the other world, and you need to understand fully what you're going to do if you're going to open portals, because you have to understand for a start how to close them. It's very easy to open, but you need to understand how to close them and how to protect yourself against them. But the thing about the Ouija board is that it has been sort of glamorized in Hollywood, and people do use it as a party tool. Rather than using it as a communication tool, they use it in a party frame of mind. They want to have a bit of fun. This is what happened. A young lady in her early 20s at a party using the Ouija board, and within hours of using the Ouija board, she was speaking in a different language. She was swearing, shouting, and causing lots and lots of problems. She moved in with her parents because she couldn't live on her own anymore. They called in some spiritual healers from a local spiritualist church, who said to the mother that her daughter had demonic entities and there's nothing more they can do. So they didn't clear, they didn't attempt to clear, they just confirmed that there was demonic entities with this young lady. And that was it. What a way to leave them. So anyway, she called. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, crying, pretty much screaming, asking for help. So I asked her to give me a little bit of time. And at an hour later, I would start doing the work for her daughter. A couple of hours later, I got a phone call back again from the crying mother, and her tears this time were tears of joy. The voices had gone. Her daughter was back to being herself. Her daughter was extremely tired and now asleep. And basically, she couldn't thank the work strongly enough. And this is the power of the work, really, is that you don't have to connect physically. You don't have to connect personally. In fact, we advise that we don't. We advise always that we stay remote, we stay disconnected. In this scenario, with demonic entities, the last thing I want to do is connect to them. I have a home to go to, I have a wife, I have children, and I do not want to entertain myself carrying that sort of baggage at all. So it's vitally important that we understand spiritual protection. We go into that in so much detail. You have to be an expert in spiritual protection, really, when you're doing this work. And it's a huge part of our courses. But it does mean that you can go into this environment and create that change. And that change is also immediate. We're talking within an hour of the work being done and the clearing taking place. There's other people as well that, you sort of work with. In fact, there was one fairly recently. We did some work for a third party. It was her brother that she wanted the work done. And we did the work, and her brother didn't acknowledge the work at all, thought that it was rubbish, thought that it didn't take place. But in her words, is her brother has now changed completely, and she's got her brother back. Her mother and father couldn't believe the change in their son, and their friends and family also noticed the change. And I think this is the thing, Andy, is that we always concentrate on the recipient, but we don't think about the people that it affects as well. Because just by changing one person, it changes the home, it changes the family, it changes the whole dynamics. So even though you might heal or clear one person, effectively what you're doing is you're bringing that clear, calm energy into the homestead. And that energy will then vibrate through the family.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Jonno, actually. And again, we do tend to not focus on that. There is a huge knock-on effect for everyone when someone's had a clearing. As you say, the local family or the local people around that person notices the difference. And this, I think, is where a lot of the work comes in, really, from our perspective, is that when we've worked on a person and a family and the people that live with them see the remarkable difference. If someone's very angry, abusive, very negative, in that kind of negative space, intrusive thoughts, intrusive voices, there's a whole kind of energy that they're carrying that's very negative that is going to percolate into that family, and of course it affects everyone. So when that person's sovereign, cleared, those negative energies have been disconnected and we've put them back in that kind of energetic protective capsule, effectively, then of course that energy is going to ripple back into the family. So when there's harmony and everything settles down and people feel in a nicer, collected space, yet the conversations change from being anger-based and negative to being positive. Laughter, people start to laugh. And I think I've lost count probably, as I'm sure you have, John, of a number of people that reply to our reports and say, our house is full of laughter again. We haven't had laughter for years and years. And as laughter is a high vibration, high vibratory frequency, and it changes people's lives. If you walk into a room where people are laughing, you start to feel like laughing too. And if you watch someone laughing, it's hard not to kind of follow. Yeah, you do the same thing. If you walk into a room where people are angry and shouting and fighting each other, then you either become submissive and kind of cower in the corner, or you leave the room generally. Nobody wants to stay in a room with people that are angry. And I think that's one of the big effects of this work, is that by bringing that emotional harmony back to the people, the clients and the recipients of the work, there is this cascading effect to everyone else in their life. And again, quite often we've got people booking clearings for people they work with, because they work with people that are negative, going through negative traumas, difficult situations. And again, the way that we're working from a kind of acceptance perspective, I guess, is we connect to the client or recipient's higher self to get permission to do the work. So effectively, you can book an appointment for someone without them having to give a formal agreement from a conscious perspective, because when we work, the spirit guide goes to the higher self of that person and ask the higher self if this is a clearing working for their highest good, generally in the highest good of humanity. And that client or recipient, 99.9% of the time, will give an okay to allow that kind of session to proceed. So that's the way that we kind of sidestep the conscious aspect of permission. And there's a good reason we do that, because quite often when there is negative control and you have negative entities that are controlling people with intrusive thoughts, voices, that type of thing, of course they're never going to give permission for us to come in and remove them, because they're there trying to control that person and take them on a very difficult negative journey. And that was the technique that Terry developed, was rather than trying to get the conscious, I would like an appointment, please, we go to the higher self of the person receiving the work and ask the higher self if it agrees, which is, again, it's kind of a breakthrough in spiritual acceptance and the spiritual understanding of how we work with people. And I think that is one of the great things about the work that Terry did, really. He could look at a problem and he would never back down and think, okay, we can't do things because of. He would say, okay, what else do we do? How do we do things differently? Let's talk to spirit guides. Let's talk to White Hawk, to Chen, to ask them, what else can we do? How do we sidestep this presenting problem? And that, I think, is why this work is so groundbreaking, really, because we're doing things differently to just about every other spiritual channel, and we're doing things differently to the general SRT arena. So if we look at the spirit release therapy arena, the people that perform spirit release therapy, they're kind of doing this in the older ways. And, we've got people like William Baldwin and other people that talked about SRT in the past and their understandings. But what we're doing is we're kind of forging a new path, really. And I kind of see us out there, mate, really, with a big scythe, chopping down, huge, big, long grass, finding a new path. And as we find that new path to tread, we get presented with different problems that we need to overcome. And when we overcome them, we kind of start to move in a completely different way. But as I think you said before on a different episode, everything we're doing is spirit-led. And that's kind of why we know it will be successful, because we're working sort of hand in hand with these other spiritual energies, and they're here to work with us, to work with humanity as a whole. And we're actually making new ground in different space and different ways. And that, I think, is a remarkably exciting place to be, really.
I think you're right, mate. I think that's one of the things, certainly where we are, is that we do have open minds, and we are very open to evolving the work even further than what we've done now. And, we're already working differently to how we were sort of 3 years ago. And I can't wait to see where we look back in 5, 6, 7 years and really see how this has evolved, because everybody coming into the academy has a point to play, has a point to prove, and a position to play. Everybody is listened to when they start talking about their work, and this is how we can just get better and better and better, hopefully closing that last 20%. But to get to that 20%, we are very proud that we have the 80% there. It's a fantastic achievement already. It's just that we are driving it forwards to try and get better. So what sort of results have you had, Andy? Is there one case that sort of stands out to you?
Yeah, I can think of one that we had recently, actually, within the last couple of months. So we were approached by a father of a son, basically. The son was hearing voices. He was suicidal, self-harming, as you said before, presenting with what we would call classic symptoms, really, of possession, spirit possession. He would talk in tongues. He would fling himself around the room. His behaviour was very, very extreme, with like a sexual element as well, which was obviously not great from a parental perspective. So this particular family had contacted the Catholic Church, and they actually wanted to put him through an exorcism in the traditional way that the church do. So the Catholic Church just don't do exorcisms. You can't just basically ring them up and say, I've got a child that's got this problem, will you exorcise them? So there's a whole kind of process to go through, I guess, to be accepted to have an exorcism. So this family went through that process with the Catholic Church. This was in America, basically. And eventually they agreed that they thought this person, this young lad, did actually have a demonic entity that was possessing him, that was presenting in, and all of the boxes were ticked to perform an exorcism. So they basically the family flew halfway across America to meet this potential Catholic practitioner that was going to perform the exorcism, that practitioner was also travelling some way, I think, across America. And there was some problem. He couldn't make it, basically, so that exorcism didn't happen. And then after that, again, they met up on Zoom and they talked about how they could kind of rebook and reschedule, and things just didn't seem to work. And in the end, the actual practitioner, the Catholic practitioner, didn't want to continue working with the family. So I didn't really get to find out the whole kind of backstory, but the backstory from my perspective was they were, as you said before, very desperate really to have some sort of intervention. They kind of lost faith in the old method they were working with, and they obviously wanted to look at something different. This was the point that one of our clients came in and knew the family as kind of friends and said, look, why don't you get hold of Spirit Release Academy? They've got practitioners there that can do this type of thing. It's worth trying. And of course, they were expecting to spend a whole weekend in a Catholic church to perform what would have been a traditional exorcism, because they go on for hours and hours. So it's kind of nothing for someone to be there for a few days. So basically, they booked a session with myself. I did the same as what I do every day, sit down, talk to Chen. So I've done my own protection. I kind of knew this was going to be a harder session to do because I already had the background around this type of possession. And it kind of pointed to the fact there was obviously a demonic entity that was clearly connected with this child and possessing them in that way. So again, talking to Chen, just worked through the normal protocol that we all work through on a daily basis. Nothing particularly stood out. There were entities attached, of course. Chen came back and told me that the session was complete. So I basically finished my sort of narrated report, sent that off to the client. I didn't really think anything of it. So that was kind of day one, really. 2 days later, I get an email back not from the family that actually invoked us, but from the friend that kind of recommended us, to say, you're never going to believe it, but he's totally fine. He's woken up. He doesn't really remember anything about what happened. He has no recollection of the behaviour that he's been doing and the things that he's been saying. And they had some video and things of him acting in this really strange way in a form of proper kind of what we would call conventional Hollywood spirit possession, really. So thrashing around, speaking in tongues, spitting at people, that kind of stuff. And he was just back to being the sweet boy that he was before. And it was a very long email, and it was quite pointed, really, about the whole journey that they'd been on. And it was quite sensitive and quite emotional, really, for us to read, because, again, we do read this on a kind of weekly basis. So I guess, and you know what it's like, mate, once you've read so many people seeing these positive changes, not that we expect it to happen, but we do expect it to happen because we know it works.
Yeah.
So I think, from my perspective, I went downstairs, spoke to my wife Jane and said, I've just had this really amazing email. And she read it and she felt a bit emotional as well. And she looked up and said, wow, we change people's lives. I said, yeah, we do. It's like, well, we don't, Spirit does, but working with Spirit we do together. But I think sometimes we kind of forget about the gravity of the situation and the huge change in a positive way that we're making on people's lives. And as I think you said before in this episode, we know where that would have gone. Someone that's convulsing, being verbally aggressive, spitting at people, would end up sectioned, so locked in a kind of mental institution, and then obviously taken down a very kind of negative path of medications and all sorts of things. But that session, again, like your session, Jonno, was like an hour of my time, and, a kind of instrumental change in that behaviour. And these are the ones that kind of stick in your mind, not because they're different, because we do it every day, but it's just the feedback from the client is so emotional and so thankful. You actually realise that, I think the words in that email were, you saved our life or his life. And you think, wow, what a kind of humble place to be that we actually can perform an intervention of something that we do many times a day, but the effect on that particular family and that person is so instrumentally positive.
And that's the profound work that's done, not just by us, but by all of our practitioners. And all of them, certainly the ones that we recommend, are on our website, spiritreleaseacademy.com. We do have a practitioner page, and they are just doing amazing work. So we hope that you've enjoyed just a couple of stories. We all have stories. All of our practitioners have stories, and we're all working towards the same thing, and that's helping people move into their own energy, away from anything negative, and being able to learn about protecting themselves and protecting their own energy, which has a ripple effect not only for themselves, but to their family, their loved ones, and to their friend circle as well. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode. We've got a couple more to go. And the next one, we talk about the myths of spirit release therapy, the remote spirit release work that we do. We talk about the fears and misconceptions, and we talk about false guides. It'll be an interesting one. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, folks. Bye-bye.
This podcast is sponsored by the Spirit Release Academy. To learn more information about the Academy and their ongoing courses, please visit spiritreleaseacademy.com.